Great, thank you. Yep. So I'm Mark Evans. I'm a Director of Engineering at 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆. I'm here to talk about the replatforming journey at 𝒍𝒊𝒃𝒃. I am conscious that I'm the only thing in the way of coffee, so I will try and get it done in under 25 minutes. But first off, I want to talk about what is replatforming. So this statement is a simple version of what replatforming can mean. It can mean things such as lift and shift to the cloud, which is where 𝒍𝒊𝒃𝒃 started in 2018, where we moved from a data center to AWS. But today, I want to focus primarily on transitioning to a new technology stack. So I hope at least some of you in the room are thinking about a replatform or are actually doing one at the moment. And there are many reasons why you want to do this. And I'll talk through some of those now. And let's see if they resonate with your situation. So there's a long list. I'm not going to go through them one by one. So I'll highlight just a few. So legacy systems and technical debt can be a limiting factor when it comes to making change. Scalability issues, where your platform can't cope with the organization's growth ambitions. Acquiring or being acquired by another company could open up opportunity to simplify technology and actually save some costs. And talent recruitment and retention, where you're struggling to retain your current team or bring new people into the organization. So these are all valid reasons for why you might want to think about a replatform. But actually, you can kind of distill these down to two, I think, fundamental points. So the first is the requirements have changed, and the platform is unable to cope with the kind of organization's ambition. And the second one is the pace of change is too slow and actually limits the company's ability to innovate and adapt and remain competitive. There is, of course, a third, which I haven't written down, which is by always replatforming, I've always got a job, which is great. So we talked a little bit around why we want to replatform. I want to talk a little bit around how. So it's quite a complex process. So for me, step one is to take a hard and honest look at why you're doing it, and if the only way to solve the problems you're facing can be solved by a replatform, or if actually a kind of a more limited change can actually achieve the same result. And the reason you want to do this is replatforming is hard. It can take between 3 and 5 years. So you don't want to just jump into this without giving it proper thought. So why is it so difficult? So again, kind of a big long list here. But ultimately, in your current platform, there is a huge amount of knowledge about your business. This is stuff that you don't just pick up by looking at code bases. This is stuff that was built maybe 10 years ago by someone that's not there anymore. And then rebuilding that, you're likely to make a mistake and not build it in the same way. And that can lead to a real challenge with bugs that are really hard to track down. You also have resistance to change. So customers, they get used to how your platform works today. They find interesting kind of workarounds for quirks in your platform. If you change that through a replatform, what you're likely to see is complaints and really negative feedback. Because ultimately, they like how it worked before. They've learned how to use it, even if the new way is going to be better. You'll likely want to use newer technologies or techniques. If your team is inexperienced, you're likely to make some very innocent mistakes. And actually, you may end up with a platform that's as bad as your current one. It doesn't mean it's going to be better. And data migration and vendor selection, they're hard things to work out, especially if you don't have experience doing it. So I'm hoping I haven't put everyone off. If I have, apologies. It's actually quite a fun thing to do. So what's step 2? So step 2 is to plan your replatform way more than you would do normally. So normally you follow potentially agile engineering principles. With a replatform, they don't work. You can't just wing doing a replatform and every 2 weeks have a plan. You've really got to take a much more deeper dive in terms of what's required, by who, by when. Because if you don't, you're going to end up in a bit of a mess. So what does that planning look like? So step one is set very clear goals. The business goals are for your kind of teams outside products and tech. The idea is to be really, really clear with them why you're doing it, what problems you're trying to solve. The technology goals are for the product and tech teams to really understand your expectations in terms of technology, the engineering principle you're thinking about. So when they're making choices throughout that replatform, they're doing it based upon some framework or some guides and not just winging it. And then I talked a little bit around planning. Ultimately, you'll likely get pushback from your team. No one likes to plan. Personally, I hate planning. But ultimately in this, the more you plan up front, the more you'll benefit from that planning. And actually, I can guarantee it will pay itself back in the end. So let's apply this to a journey I went through. Say a journey, it was a bit of a PTSD. So at Moonpig, we went through multiple replatforms, and I'll talk about just one of them. So if we think about business goals, what were we trying to achieve? So the first one was, we saw teams spending a lot of time building what could be considered very generic functionality. So e-commerce baskets, vouchers, promotions, nothing that was really special for Moonpig. So we took the option to look at, where can we buy stuff and where can we build stuff? Like, where does engineering add real value? And building generic e-commerce stuff doesn't bring a lot of value. But we were very, very keen to own the user experience. So that was part of how we chose vendors. We were keen that the new platform was easy to change, so we could roll out to new countries, which we did in Ireland. And actually allow more experimentation. So we did that through A/B testing feature flags, and by making that part of the platform from the beginning, it was way easier to do than trying to do it later. And then we come to the technology goals. So we'd already chosen AWS as the platform. So actually, how can we leverage that and the many, many things that it provides to give us more time and space to innovate? Amazon's got, sub 300 services, so there's a lot of room there for us to do the right thing. We were really, really keen that the technology we chose was the right one. Often engineers want to use the new cool thing, we go Rust or Golang, but actually we're really, really keen that the choices we made were right for the business. And we did that through a set of engineering principles, which really gave the team a clear framework in terms of what we expected. And we're also keen, running infrastructure doesn't bring much value to a business. Who wants to run servers and networking? So actually, how can we use this to really simplify how our estate looked and minimize low value work, which obviously, for me, managing infrastructure is not a thing that brings value. So when we got to vendor selection, we looked at a whole range of things, and we tried out a whole bunch of things, and ultimately picked Commerce Tools and Contentful. These gave us the generic functionality for content and e-commerce, but more importantly, gave us a way to integrate them with headless, so we could still own the user experience. And that was a key part of our business goal. We also had to scale our teams quite heavily. We grew from 35 to 120. And that was across both London and Manchester. We used partners like Build Circle, who also helped us throughout this process. But it was really, really keen to, you can't deliver a replatform with a small team. It requires a lot of work. And as we were building out a new architecture, a new way of working, a new way of integrating with SaaS, we didn't just throw everyone at the replatform on day one. We really wanted to take the time to understand the technology, the architecture, and our approach. So we ramped up the teams working on replatform over time to give us a chance to take that learning. And obviously, scaling the engineering team, the benefit you have is you can hire for skills that you need. So thinking about the tech choices we made, we could find people that had the knowledge of those techniques and technologies, and then use them to train the existing team as well. So actually, it's a really good way of using kind of formal and informal learning. And then we had to look at rollout. like, how do we get this thing live? So at a very, very high level, there were kind of two choices. One was kind of incremental, where we release it a bit at a time, almost a page at a time, or to a certain amount of traffic. Or we could have gone down the big bang release and overnight flip the platform. But we're really, really keen to realize the value of the new platform really early. And with a big bang, it pushes that value almost to the end. So actually, it's really, really hard to keep going when you're not quite sure where you're going to end up. Incremental releases do have a challenge in terms of user experience, like how do you flip between the two? What's the user experience? What's the user journey? So definitely some challenges there for us to solve. So how do we solve them? And we did, which is good. So first off, we broke the platform itself down into kind of parts of the user journey. And these were spaces where we felt that you could seamlessly move between old and new platform without the user experience being really jarring. We also looked at the kind of clients, so web versus native mobile. And then a third dimension was geolocation, because we had dedicated sites for the UK, the US, and Australia. So they were really interesting ways for us to experiment. The traffic was lower, the product range was a lot simpler. So actually there was less risk there experimenting with more international territories versus trying to risk with the UK. And that's ultimately what we did. We started rolling it out in Australia, ramped up traffic in the UK. So yeah, really had a chance to prove out that platform. And then I talked about re-platforming taking 3 to 5 years. It's about 4.5, so it's not bad. So yeah, started in 2019. We talked about incremental releasing. So the white stars are bigger things that we released. They weren't the things we released at a time. We were actually releasing at the start of 2019, probably 8-10 times a day. And then by the end, probably 60 times per day. So actually, almost every day, a new thing was being released to the platform. You'll see the nice gold star at the end of 2021. So this is when we had the first end-to-end journey in the UK and a business peak. So this really went, the new platform works, it can scale, it can cope with our business. So that was chance for a very big party, which we did. And a really great milestone for the team, like all that, 2 and a bit years of work proved actually, yeah, we can scale and get what we needed. So there's a lot of things you can learn in 5 years, and I'll cover just a few. I'm a big fan of looking at what went well. So, from my perspective, what went well? So I think the incremental rollout was definitely a really good idea. Like, it really allowed us to prove out our plan, our architecture. We could scale up and scale down, so if there were issues, we could fall back to legacy platform almost instantaneously. So actually, it kind of gave us a lot of confidence that we could keep pushing. We picked serverless as a technology and that really allowed us to simplify our kind of infrastructure. In fact, there was almost no infrastructure at the end. Almost everything we did was based around serverless, even down to Aurora, DynamoDB, like almost no physical EC2 machines or anything like that. And that really saved the team time with thinking about scaling up for peak, scaling down after peak, patching machines, like, again, all fairly low value work. We chose early on that we would write back data from the new platform to legacy, because this would allow us to unblock teams from being dependent on each other. Especially where you see in the roadmap, the fulfillment team came quite late through that process. So actually allowing us to write that data back meant we could move forward with replatforming without having to wait for them to finish. And then the kind of two simple ones, which is, we saw an improved pace of change. We can get things out in days rather than weeks. And actually we managed to delete, 15 years of technical debt, which I think anyone that loves technical debt can celebrate. But we learned more from what didn't go well than what did go well. So there's a few more things here. So I talked a little bit around, planning up front more than you really want to. 2019 Mark didn't do that. So actually we found some dependencies were more complicated than we thought, which gave us some interesting surprises. I'm now much wiser and won't do that again. I talked about the seamless, move between old and new. Whilst that was really great from a move fast, it did limit what we could do to fix the UI. Because without making a change on both, it was really, really difficult. So we ended up making much smaller incremental changes to the UI than we'd like. And we knew there were things that fundamentally weren't working, but couldn't change them until quite late. I talked about incremental releasing so we could deliver short-term business value. That meant changing the current platform. We couldn't have the entire business on hold for 2 or 3 years. So we were still making changes to legacy to give business growth. That meant that ultimately the end target was always moving. So when people said to me, when's it finished? I'm like, I don't know, some point. Because ultimately you didn't know where you were going to get to. Legacy systems, as I talked about with fulfillment, they were almost there till the very end. So actually, our estate got more complicated before we got simpler. And actually, some of the old platform was fairly expensive to run, so we couldn't necessarily take cost savings up really early. The reporting was also kind of interesting, because we had 2 data sources. Depending on what journey you took, old or new, we had different data. We built in some very, very nice new data structures for new platform. So we couldn't necessarily leverage them early on in reporting. So it certainly got complicated. And then decommissioning, it was deprioritized by teams. They'd seen the light, they'd seen the new cool stuff. Turning off the old stuff was boring. So actually they weren't necessarily motivated to get that done. And then, incremental rollout. So whilst it certainly helped us prove out the architecture, in some ways it made us a little bit more risk averse. And we spent a long time analyzing small changes in conversion rate and small parts of pages, rather than going, it looks to be about right, let's just keep moving forward. Small one for me. So if I was crazy enough to try and do this thing again, what would I do differently? And there's I guess 4 things. The first one is, more detailed planning. Like, ultimately, you can't know all the answers. You can't plan with a degree of certainty. But what you can do is force teams to think about what they might be, and at least try and identify some things which may catch you out. So I'd definitely be a bit more upfront for the planning. Take more risks. Okay, for me, I'm not accountable for the P&L. But ultimately, I want to take more risks and move faster. We released the first landing page. We then monitored and watched that for a few weeks before looking at the next one. Like, just keep going until you get a signal that says stop. I would probably want to keep going. I'll talk about technology choices. Like we spent a long time thinking about them. We then, for commerce tools, they had an experimental GraphQL API. They had an experimental stream of events for data. I thought, great, this gives us a really great architecture. Both were marked as beta. Both were marked as not in production. So what do? We put them in production. So when there were issues, commerce tools were less than helpful sometimes. So in some ways, whilst it did improve our architecture, we could maybe have gone faster without those issues coming up. And especially GraphQL, there's always debate around what's the right tool. So I'd probably be a little bit less pushy on being bleeding edge. And then the final one is, I guess, hold teams accountable for decommissioning. Make it part of their definition of done, rather than let them get away with just ignoring it, and then it becoming my problem. So definitely put that as one of my learnings. And I'll leave you with a parting thought, and I'll refer back to one of my earlier statements around make sure it's the right thing for you to do. Don't just do it because it feels fun or cool. Really think about it and do that deep dive, because it will take longer and be harder than you ever think when you start. And on that, time for some coffee. Thank you.